Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session for today. We're going through another part of our EIT initiative for accessibility, so focusing on electronic and information technology and the accessibility here on campus. Today, we're going to talk about classroom and classroom content accessibility, but also if you work in student services or one of our other areas like the library or something else on campus, most of the same things are going to apply to any documents or things that come out of your office. So it's the same features you should be applying, even though it might be done through a classroom lens. So Donna Simiele from Online Learning is here to present today. Thank you, Donna, for giving us helpful information.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I want to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Beautiful.
Okay, great. Okay, so today we're looking at making content accessible for all, and as Caitlin said, it's not just.
Can you put it in the slideshow setting just so it's full screen for the viewers? I think.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's not what I want.
There.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So as Caitlin said, it's not just faculty members that are producing content to use in the classrooms, but also in the offices and sharing with everybody. And it's a good idea to make sure that basically everything that we create is accessible for all. And it doesn't necessarily even mean accommodations for a student. It could be somebody. I know that we have a faculty member that can only read Times New Roman. She has a terrible time reading Arial. So whenever she gets any documents, she automatically changes the font as soon as she gets the documents. So, it's not just somebody who needs accommodations, but it's, sometimes it's personal preference and what others need. All right. So we are going to focus a little bit more on looking at for courses and stuff, but we're going to talk about choosing textbooks materials and making sure that our publisher content is accessible for all. We're going to talk about videos, making sure now, right now we're looking at Blackboard content and using the Blackboard Ally tool. This, even if when we move from Brightspace to Brightspace, we are still planning on having Ally available in Brightspace. So what I show you in there is going to be available in Brightspace as well. How to go in and make Word, PowerPoint files accessible, and then converting those into an accessible PDF file. Okay, so those are the main topics that we're going to be covering in this session. Okay, I'm going to give you a lot of resources, and a lot of the resources are at the end of this presentation, so you'll have it once this gets sent out. Okay. Third-party tools are a big thing right now, and we've worked very hard with a lot of the publishers to make sure that the content that they offer is ADA compliant. And to give you some ideas of some of the things that we were looking for, the ebooks have to be able to be read by screen readers. And obviously there's different formats of different types of screen readers. So it's important for us to, ask the question, can a screen reader read this? What type of file format it is? Often they're in a PDF. And we have to ask these questions when we're talking to the publishers to make sure that they're complying as well and what they're providing the faculty meet the standards. In years past, I've worked with many of the publishers to make sure that their PowerPoints were PDF or accessible. And that was a huge thing. And I know that some of the publishers actually pulled a lot of their PowerPoint resources because they didn't have the time to make them ADA compliant, but they've slowly added them back in. But it's a good idea to ask your publishers to make sure that, what tools that they're giving you are able to be read, able to be used with all of our different accessibility tools and stuff. The Caitlin's going to talk about VPATs. I have actually created a document on our blog, and I can show you where to find this, that we've taken a lot of the VPATs that are available for the different publisher content. And I'm not going to get into it. Caitlin, if you want to jump in and explain what a VPAT is, you can. It's just something that we need to have in our courses to show that we've done diligence to make sure that our content that we're using from the publisher is accessible. Okay. One of the things that we also recommend is having the accessibility statements for any third-party content that we're using in our courses. So I have an accessibility statement for Blackboard right now, and then I'll add the Brightspace to my courses. So you want to make sure if you're using anything like, let's say, Connect or MyLabs, make sure that you can do a quick search and find out if they have an accessibility statement for those third-party contents, and add a link to that from your course to make sure that you check to make sure it is accessible. Okay. There are some links in here that talk about how to make content accessible, and I have the website through the 508 accessibility for videos, and there's a link in here. And one of the biggest things that we need to do is make sure that any of our videos that we include in our courses, and it doesn't matter if it's face-to-face, online, hybrid, blended, any place that you're asking a student to watch a video, we are responsible to make sure that the videos have closed caption. Now, they do allow that you can do transcripts, but it's actually a best practice to have the closed captions match up with what's on this video at the time that they're talking about it. A transcript they can print out, they can use it to take notes. Anybody can, to download those. But they find that if a student is trying to watch the video, if the captions don't match up with what they're seeing on the screen, it's not as useful. So that's, something you've got to make sure of. Also, if you create your own videos and you upload them to YouTube or Ensemble, you need to edit them and go in and fix the errors that occur. Usually in a video, it will try, like we have automatic closed caption for YouTube and for Ensemble. And depending on your speech, how well you enunciate your words, how fast you're talking, how slow you're talking, the closed captions might not be created 100% accurate. So always, go back through your videos, double check them, make sure your closed captions are there, make sure that they do match up. If you have a video that's through a publisher and you find that there's mistakes in it, contact the publisher and ask them to fix those mistakes so that, you have an up-to-date one. If you see a video on YouTube that you're using in your course and the captions don't match up with what's being said, see if you can find another video. And if you can't find another video with the same information, then reach out to the owner of the video and see if they can make changes to the captions. Okay. But again, it takes time. We've got to make sure that we do what we're supposed to be doing and double checking these things. Okay. All right. Documents and best practices. I know that earlier this week that some of this was discussed on what fonts to use, what font sizes we should have, what colors we should be using, what we shouldn't be using. And when we first started and we were trained back in 2014, we were told sans serif fonts were the only fonts we could use. So that eliminated Times New Roman. It could not be used. Since then, they've, opened it up a little bit and said, okay, Times New Roman isn't bad. You can keep that for your documents in your courses. And you probably noticed over the years that even like Microsoft Word changed their default font from Times New Roman to Calibri. And that was to make it more ADA compliant. So if somebody just went in and typed out a document, it was already using the correct fonts. Okay, so font sizes for your document should be a font size 12 or higher, especially if you're going to be handing them out in the class, a hard copy. Your PowerPoint presentation should be 16 or higher. Now, if you're using electronic versions of documents, most people that need larger prints will know ahead of time that they can enlarge their screen. Anybody can enlarge a document on their screen to be able to read it a little bit easier. So on like my computer, I can hold down the control key and roll the roller on my mouse to expand or shrink down the font sizes. You also have in the browsers, you have an option that usually it's the 3 dots in the upper right hand corner, and you can change the screen sizes there. So if it's an electronic copy, we don't have to worry about it as much for the font sizes, but for hard copies, we do. PowerPoint presentation, your font sizes are important based on where the presentation is going to be displayed. on, like right now, these are at least a size 18 on the screen at this point. So because you're looking at a screen right in front of you, you shouldn't have a problem reading it. But if you had a 16-point font and you're in the back of a lecture hall and the PowerPoint is up on the screen, you've got to make sure that what you're using in the classrooms can be read from somebody all the way in the back row. Okay, so it's very important that when you get into presentation material to make sure that you are doing what you need to do so it can be seen by everybody in that room. And it doesn't matter if they have a problem with their sight, anybody should be able to see it in the classrooms. Okay, color contrast. Obviously, you've got to make sure that what you have for your text color is dark enough or bright enough to show against the background that you're using. And I know that we're going to talk about Blackboard Ally, and it picks up the color red for some reason. It doesn't like using the basic red that people often will choose when they create their documents. They're preferring the more almost a burgundy red color. So some of those things will pop up if you take a document and you load it into Blackboard Ally and it checks it for accessibility issues. This might be one of the things that they talk about. So brightness and contrast will make a difference. We talk about color contrast in the sense if a student is colorblind, if you're using red and green on the same page, you've got to make sure that if they can't distinguish between the color, does that content still make sense? So for an example where it might be a problem, if you say all the verbs on this page are in green and all the pronouns on the page are in red, that isn't going to signify what they actually are to a student that can't see those color contrasts. So you can still use color, but you've got to make sure that color isn't going to be the only identifier for, you know, saying that this is a specific thing. Okay, so keep that in mind. Documents, you've got to use headings. It doesn't matter if it's a Google Doc or a Word doc, whatever. You've got to do headings that helps map out the documents. Anything that's more, especially more than a page long, headings will help navigate somebody who is using a screen reader. So for an example, if you look at your syllabus and you have a section for grading scale, another section for assignments, another section for, you know, how you will be graded, a breakdown on how everything is going to be graded in the course. And if you have set headings on each one of those, a screen reader is going to let the student that's using a screen reader, or even a student that is fine and has no sight issues at all and is not using a screen reader, if they turn on the navigation, they can click on certain headings and it will jump to that spot in the documents. And the screen reader will allow them to do the same thing. If you have a syllabus, let's say that's 5 pages long, and somebody's using a screen reader to read it, if you don't have any headings, they can't jump to a certain spot in that document. So it's very important to make sure that you do this. And even for, you know, anybody that's using the navigation tools in Microsoft Word, and it also works in Google Docs, they can pull up these, the navigation, and they can jump to a specific spot in the document without having to read through the whole document to find it. The next thing on here is avoiding underline. I'm automatically, as soon as I see something underlined on the page, I immediately click on it thinking it should be a link to somewhere. So try avoiding using that. It's not necessarily a faux pas that you shouldn't be using it. It's just for common sense that anybody that's using underline or reading something underline, they're going to assume it's a link. Because that's how links are usually identified. So kind of, you know, keep that in mind. I don't recommend it myself. Using line spacing. A lot of us have a tendency to, if you want a gap between paragraphs, we will often go in and add extra hard returns. Stay away from doing that. There's an option in any of your word processors to do after spacing, so that when you hit enter, it automatically leaves a number of space in between. If you're trying to create a document where you have bullets or numbering, by adding those extra spaces, it turns that off, and then you have to turn it back on again. But if you set before and after spacing, it will space it out when you hit enter, and it will leave the gap, and then it will set that new bullet or that numbering. So line spacing is better to use in your documents. Okay. When you're using numbering or bullets, don't create your own, use the tools in the documents. Okay. Setting tabs. I can't tell you how many documents I've opened up where they have something on the left-hand side and they've tabbed over 5 times to line up the next thing and type something in. And then the next line, it only required 4 tabs to jump over. We should actually be going in and programming in and setting tabs where we want them. So between sections of lines of text, we should be just tabbing over to the next section. We shouldn't be using multiple tabs, okay? Avoid using tables as placeholders. Tables should only be used if they're showing some type of data, okay? It should have a row at the top saying what headings to describe what's in each one of the columns. It should not be just something to hold text in a certain spot on the page, okay? Alt text is required for a lot of things. I know that Ryan talked about in the presentation earlier this week that if you have images, if you have URLs, if you have tables, they all require alt text to describe what they actually are. Okay, so again, a screen reader will be able to read that to them before it actually goes down through and reads the data in the table, or before it jumps to that graphic in your images and stuff like that. And I know that he mentioned something about if the picture is there for just a decoration, in your alt text, you should say it's just a decorative image. Otherwise, you should describe what is seen in the images. Okay. Scan documents. We have many documents in our courses where somebody has just gone in and taken like a handwritten note, or taken, you know, maybe a page out of a publisher book or something like that, and they just take that, create a PDF with it, and then they post that in their courses. The problem with that is a screen reader cannot read a scan-in document that's set up that way. Okay. If you have a document that you only have a hard copy of it and it needs to be able to be read by a screen reader, we actually have scanners down in Frackie that they can come and bring that document and have it scanned in, and it can be scanned in as a Word document, a PDF that could be read, or it can be brought in as a Excel file. So we have different options on scanning documents in. Okay. When creating PowerPoints, you will see different layouts for slides. So if you have a slide where you have a title and then a graphic underneath it, you should be using the layout that says that there's a title and a content item on the page. If you have something where it has a title and 2 content areas side by side, it could be bulleted text and an image. You should be using the layout that is set up for this. We want to avoid going in and just adding a text box onto a slide, or adding a box to add an image in. We should actually have it as a content area. And that's something that I can help you out with, or I can show you some of the tools in Microsoft PowerPoint to set those up. Okay. So we've already talked about using headings. Blackboard does not have the ability to have tables in it. I do not know at this point how tables are being used in Brightspace. We'd have to look into that. Discussions over the last couple of years, we discovered that in Blackboard, if you just send the students to the discussion tab, and the student has to look through the whole set of discussions for the entire course to figure out which one to go into, that's not an option. You actually need to put a link to the discussion where you want them to use that discussion in the course. So if you have modules, you would actually have a link to the discussion right in the module. Okay. We've already talked about long documents, and in Blackboard, they are, even in Brightspace, we're recommending that you should actually create a Word file, make sure it's ADA compliant, and then load that into no matter what LMS we're going to be using. So if you start with a ADA compliant document and load that in, it will be ADA compliant inside the courses. Okay. All right, so some of the resources that we have Blackboard Ally. Blackboard Ally, if you ever look at your files that you've uploaded in a Blackboard, you'll see this gear in the bottom left-hand corner. It will take some time to be able to evaluate the document once you first load it. But if you see the gear there, you would want to click on the gear, and it will tell you what's wrong with the document. And it will actually give you step-by-step instructions depending on how you created that document. So it'll give you like different versions of Word and stuff like that. And it will give you the instructions on how to fix it. The other option for Blackboard ALI, and it's still going to be a Blackboard product, it's that we're going to be using in Brightspace if we keep this contract. They will have an option to download an alternative format. So for an example, if you have a student, maybe the instructor only loaded a Word file and the student doesn't have Microsoft Word on their computer, they can go to the A next to the file name, click on the A, and they'll get an option of alternative file formats, and they can download the file as a PDF or an HTML file, and there's a whole list there. So hopefully they can download it to something that can be used by their tools that they're using or whatever equipment they're using. And it doesn't matter who it is in the course. Like I said, it could be anybody that doesn't have Microsoft Word, and how are they going to read it if they can't view the document? Okay, so that's one of the options of Blackboard Ally. Okay, in Microsoft Office, all the products, if you go to the file menu and go to check for accessibilities, it will check the documents and help you and let you know what problems there are in files. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind. They're going to help you out as much as possible. And then we have a lot of the resources that I've talked about and how to use them. I've got videos on our online learning blog. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to exit that. And I'm going to go to our blog, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste this into our chat. Okay, and on our blog, we have a section for creating accessible context. So all the stuff that I talked about using Blackboard Ally, being able to take a Microsoft Word document and create an accessible one, how to take one of those Word document and create an accessible PDF. We have a whole set of recordings that I have made over the years. And I've even included how long the recordings are, so you know how much time you would need to be able to go in and use these. And there's a whole section in there on how to use Blackboard Ally, how to make a Word document accessible, how to make accessible PDF files. There's one little thing you have to do to a Word file after you've made it 100%, and I talk about it in that video. There's tutorials down below if you want more resources. We've got tons and tons of resources for you. I am going to go in to Blackboard. And like I said, it doesn't matter if we're using Blackboard, if we're using Brightspace. We will have the option in here for making content accessible using Blackboard Ally. So I'm going to go ahead and just go into one of my modules in here. Okay, so you can see here, I have a perfect score on these documents in here. So these are documents that my students are going to be opening and using for the instructions for the assignments in the course. Okay, and I know that if I open up my projects, you can see that some of these are not ADA compliant. These are for me, so I don't have to worry about them. They're hidden from students. And if you go to a gear, it's telling me this one's high, so it's a little bit lighter green, but I can click on that and it will actually show me the document that I have loaded in here, and it will try and tell me what's wrong with it. So it's telling me that there's a problem with tables and missing headers, and it tries to highlight it in here. So this one here is just the whole thing is a table. So this is an example of where you normally wouldn't use a table for a placeholder. But for me, this is for me, not for the students, so I wouldn't have to worry so much about it. But the nice thing about Ally is if I don't know what they're talking about here, there's an option of what does this mean? And you can read that. Then I can close that up and I can say, how do I do it? How do I fix this? So I can come in here and I can actually figure out how to do it in Office, or how to do it in the new library Office 5.2. So if I say, okay, I have Office, it will actually show me exactly the steps and what I have to take to go in and fix this document. Okay, so If you are going to do this now, I would highly recommend that once you fix the document and you bring it back in here, you want to come into that gear. You want to click on the gear and click on this browse, and you would upload the new file. And what that will do is it will remove the old file that has ADA compliant issues, and it will replace it in your course with the new updated, hopefully fixed, and the score will go up, and then it will let you know if there's any other issues. Okay, so that's Blackboard Ally. Okay, and actually, let me go back into there. Okay. All right, so I basically have that same file as a document. So let me enable the editing here. And I'm going to blow it up so you can see a little bit better. And some of the things I can see right off the bat, there's some problems with my text rolling over on the next page, but this is for me, so I wouldn't normally have to worry about it. But when you're working in a Word document, what you need to do when you're done is go to File, and there's an option in here of check for issues. Now, if you're using an old version of a Word document, you might need to go in and it might have an option to update the file to use the new versions of this version of Word. So you might have to update first, and then the check for issues will come up. So when I click on check for issues and then hit check for accessibility, it gives me problems that are in this document. So if I click on the first one, I added a basically a floating text box, and it does not like that because it's not in line with the text that I'm using in the document, and any of your objects need to be in line with the text. So I could go in and I could fix that. And it tells you on the bottom, once you select it, it gives you instructions down below as to how to fix this. Okay. It doesn't like when I have, here's something here where I've gone in and I can turn my codes on so I can see it. I've used spaces instead of using a tab in here. So really what I should have done was made that one single tab. So I put a tab in there. Oh, because it's a table, I have to do a control tab. Okay. And then what I should actually do is create a tab where I want that to be in my document. You can see how it's moving with my tab there. Okay, so you really should set tabs. Don't use spaces to line things up. Don't use multiple tabs to line things up. Just set where you want the text to line up. So right here, this is in a table, but normally a lot of people would do is put tabs in here to separate this, to line it up, which is not good. But that by fixing and getting rid of that, all those extra spaces, it eliminated it from the error box. So if I do this one, change that to a tab, you can see it disappeared from my list here. Okay, and if I go to the next one, it doesn't like all these hard returns in here to line things up. So I would need to get rid of some of these, but you can see it's kind of messing things up when I lay it out. But this is where your line spacing would come in. So if I wanted that spacing back in there to separate it, I could go into the line spacing option, go into line spacing and change my after spacing to push that down, and I can set it to whatever point I want. You can see that just moved it down. It's not exactly across from the SUNY Center for Professional Development. So I might need to go back in and change the line spacing maybe a little bit bigger. And now it's lined up with that. So you don't want to add a whole bunch of hard returns to make things line up. So that's another thing that Word will often check. And then it talks about this table reading order. This one here is a prime example of what not to use as a placeholder for tables. I like to use it for doing resumes because it saves on setting up all the tabs and everything to line everything up. But if you were to send this resume to somebody who was using a screen reader, they might not be able to read this properly. So you got to keep that in mind if you're going to be using tables for placeholders. Okay, so again, it talks about at the bottom what you have to do to make this work properly. So if I select the whole table and I go into the design, if I decide that I want it to have, see how as soon as I did that, it messed everything else up over here. So now I've got more fixes that I have to do. So fixing one thing might cause more errors. So, but just keep in mind, you want to get this down to nothing. Okay. Save your file, go back into your LMS and load that file in once it's been fixed. Okay. So that's how you can do it in Word. That's how you can use Ally. Like I said, we've got all those resources out here on our blog. Okay. I think I am at our half an hour time.
You
So
are. Thank you, Donna. That was a ton of information to put in, but you did it nice and concise and tons of resources for everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to record this and throw captioning on it and send it out to the rest of the community so everybody could watch this historically as well. I can send a copy to you if you wanted to add it to your page if this is a different version as well if you want. And
Nothing
thank you
new.
all for attending. I appreciate it. Does anyone have a question before we log off? No? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.